This video may appear to be out of place, but for many students coming back to education, perhaps after a long time, they may find quite simple, straightforward mathematics to be a little challenging. So what we do is we make available the very fundamentals of the subject. We make no apologies for this. The very basics of the subject. And in this way, anyone who's slightly worried about whatever, percentages or fractions or one of those topics, they can go just look up a video on it. It's a refresher for most people. You may not want it. If you don't want it, just leave it. Just ignore it, pass on. But some people want to refresh and bring back what they were taught at school or what they picked up on the way, just by looking at how we manipulate fractions. And that's all the video is attempting to do. So let's look at see how it works. We're going to start with just start with a fraction. Really, it's an entity. It's a shape. It's a circle in our case. And to get to the fractions, what we're going to do is we're going to divide it in half. So now we've got half a circle. Now if you look at the number 1/2, 1/2, we've got one circle and two parts. And this is one of the two parts that's above. I'll just put the cursor on the screen. I'm just using an ordinary computer cursor here. But there we've got our circle, and it's in a half. That's it, just half a circle. If I took the other half, I'd have half a circle plus half a circle. There you are, half a circle plus. They're separated. I just pull them apart in a sense. And what we'd have is we'd have a circle is equal to half a circle plus half a circle. Now if I join those back up, I get back to here. Here is just pulled apart. So we have taken one circle and divided it into two parts. Now just to get a little deeper, we often say, what is half of something? What is half of 4? Well, half of 4 is 2. If you ask anybody, it sounds right. Half of 4 is 2. Half of 6 is 3. Half of 2 is 1. The of means multiply. So what we're doing is we're multiplying a half by 4 to get 2. And that's the same as 4 times 1 over 2. 4 times 1 is 4 over 2. So we have 4 over 2. Now divide the 4 by the 2 and you get 2. So a half of 4 is 2. Now the next move is to give names to what we're doing here. So the top part of a fraction is called the numerator. The bottom part is called the denominator. So we divide the numerator by the denominator to find the value of the fraction. So what is 1/3 of 12? Well, that's the same as 12 divided by 3, or 12 multiplied by 1/3. Now 12 divided by 3, well, we can cancel here. We can cancel out common numbers. So we get 3 into 3. 3 divided by 3 is 1. So we have to divide the numerator by the same. So 12 divided by 3 is 4. Now 4 divided by 1 is 4. So we have just moved across in a very straightforward fashion. What we've picked up here is the name of the top part and the bottom part of the fraction. Of means multiply, and we've got an idea of how to get something like 1/3 of 12. We write down the 12, that becomes our numerator, and the 1/3, the 3 becomes the denominator. Divide the numerator by the denominator, and we got the answer here is 4. Now with this one we've got a circle, and then we've halved the circle. We've got half and a half. We just, in a sense, pulled it apart. So we've got one circle, that's the numerator, in two parts. That's the denominator. So that's one circle, and that's one of the two parts. That's one circle, it's one of the two parts. If we join those back up together, we go back to our original circle. We can go further. We can divide this half by 2, in which case we get a quarter and a quarter, quarter and a quarter. We'd have 4 quarters, which shouldn't surprise us, because if we add 4 quarters together, we've got 1 quarter plus a quarter, which is 2 quarters, plus a quarter, which is 3 quarters, plus a quarter, which is 4 quarters. 4 quarters is just 1. So pictorially, we can start to imagine fractions as splitting up entities, splitting up a shape, or splitting up a number. So 1 divided into 4 equal parts is this one here. We couldn't go further, of course. We could divide the quarters into 1/8 or 1/16. It just looks very difficult to draw, so I didn't do it. Let's go down here. We can add fractions. Here we've got half a circle. We're adding half a circle. If you add half and a half, you get 1. Half plus a half equals 1. Join half a circle to the half a circle, put them together, and you get the circle, the full circle. So a half plus a half is equal to 2 over 2. We add the numerators. We add the top parts. 1 plus 1 is 2. The denominator, we keep it as 2. We do that because we have 2 parts. We've divided into 2 parts. And that's one of the 2 parts, and that's the other one of the 2 parts. If we add the 2 parts together, we get back to the circle over here. So we've now got an idea about adding fractions. It can become a little bit more complex. For example, if we add a half plus 1/3. Now, here the denominators are different. The denominator is 2, and the denominator is a 3 here. So we can't do that. We can't just say 1 plus 1 is 2, 2 plus 3 is 5, so the answer is 2 over 5. That's wrong. We've got to make them into the same base. We've got to make them conformable. They've got to agree. So what we need is a common denominator. Now in this case, we can easily find a common denominator. The common denominator for the 2 fractions is 2 times 3, which is 6. That's the easiest way to do it. So now 2 into 6 goes 3 times. So this is a 3 over 6. 3 into 6 goes twice, plus 2 over 6. So we'd have a 3 over 6 and a 2 over 6. We can do that. We can add those together. We can't just simply say a half plus 1/3 is 1 plus 1 is 2, 2 plus 3 is 5, so it's 2 over 5. That's wrong. We need a common denominator. So, taking 6, we have 2 into 6 goes 3 times. 3 times 1 is 3. 3 into 6 is twice. 2 times 1, twice 1, is 2. Now, add it together. Well, these are the parts, so we can't add those together. So it's a 6. 6 remains the same. But the 3 plus the 2 is a 5. The answer is 5/6. So 5/6 is a half plus 1/3. Now that's adding fractions. That's the way to add fractions, to find a common denominator. We must always do this. Otherwise we won't get the right answer, and that can be serious. Look at this one. It's 1 over 4. It's a quarter plus 1/5. What's that equal to? Common denominator here is 20. 5 times 4 is the easiest way to find it. 5 times 4 is 20. That's just a quick way for small fractions. If it's a bigger number, we might be able to reduce the bigger number. We want the lowest common denominator. We'll talk about that later. But for the moment, 5 times 4 is 20. So 4 into 20 is 5. So 5 over 20. Now look at this one here, 1/5. 5 into 20 is 4. 4 times 1 is 4. So it's 4 over 20. Now added together, 5 plus 4 is 9. 9 over 20. So 1 over 4 plus 1 over 5 is equal to 9 over 20. And that's how we work it out. You could do more fractions. You could do 3 fractions. Here we're adding a half plus 1/3 plus 1/5. Again, the same technique. We need to find the common denominator. Now, here it's 5 3s are 15, 2 15s is 30. So common denominator is 30. Sometimes we can find the common denominator to be smaller, but if you look here, that is the smallest one. 5 goes into it 4 times, 3 goes into it 10, 2 goes into it 15. There's no smaller number. You can't take anything else. It has to be 30. So 2 into 30 is 15. 15 times 1, the one up here, 15 times 1 is 15. So it's 15 over 30. 15 over 30 is the same as a half. This one is 1/3. So it's 3 into 30, which is 10. 10 times 1, 10. So 10 over 30 is 1/3. 5 into 30 is 6. 6 times 1 is 6. So it's 6 over 30. Now if we add it all up, we got 15 plus 10, which is 25. 25 and 6 is 31. So you've got 31 over 30. We could write that differently. We could say it's actually 30 goes into 31, it goes in once, and there's 1 left over, so it's 1 and 1/30. So you could write it as 31 over 30 or 1 and 1/30. Depends on what's required. Both are correct. Here we want to add a quarter plus 1/10 plus a half. Well, if we multiply the denominators here, we'll get 80. 4 times 10 is 40, and twice 40 is 80. It's a big number, 80. So can we do it with a smaller number, like 40? Will 4 go into 40? Yes, it'll go in 10 times. 10 will go into 40, goes in twice. 2 goes into 40 20 times. So 40 is smaller. That's better. Can we get it smaller again? Try 20. 4 into 20, yeah, goes 5 times. 10 into 20 goes twice. 2 into 20 goes 10 times. So this is the lowest common denominator. That's the best number to use. We could use 80 and we could use 40, but it's always the best, good practice in arithmetic, in mathematics, to get the smallest number, get the most efficient one. So this one would be 20, the lowest common denominator. That's what we're looking for. So we don't just like I said earlier, multiply the denominators together and take that as the denominator for the added up fraction. We try to find one which is more efficient, and this one is. 20 is better than 80 would work, 40 would work, but 20 is a good one. 20 is the smallest. Now let's do it. 4 into 20 goes into 5 times, so it's 5 over 20. 10 goes into 20 twice, so it's 2 over 10. 2 goes into 20 10 times, so it's 10 over 20. Add up. 10 plus 2 is 12, plus 5 is 17. 17 over 20. So when you add this up, we get 17 over 20. That's the answer. Simplification means writing the fraction with the smallest denominator. So try to get the fractions with the smallest possible denominator, the one that works. Like I did earlier, we could have used 80, we could have used 40, but we used 20. So find the lowest common denominator. If we look at this, 2, 3 and 5. Well, the smallest common denominator here is 30. And that actually is found by saying 2 times 3, 6. 6 times 5 is 30. Now if we try to find a smaller number, say 15, 2 won't go into 15. Well, it won't go in without a remainder. It goes in 7.5 times, so it's no good to us. 3 will go into 15, 5 will go into 15, but 2 won't. So 30 is the smallest common denominator. It's the lowest common denominator. So simplification means writing fractions with the smallest denominator. Here we take a quarter plus 1/10 plus a half. So it's 4. If we multiply them together, that's over 80. So we'll take it over 80 for the moment. So we'd have 4 into 80 goes in 20 times. So 20 times 1 is 20. 10 goes into 80 8 times. So 1 times 8, which is there. And the denominator over here, the 2, goes into 80 40 times. 40 times 1 is 40. Now, if we add this up, we'd get 20 plus 8 is 28, plus 40, which is 68. So 68 is our answer, 68 over 80. Well, if we divide that, if we divided it by, let's say, 4, we get 17 over 20. And that's a preferable answer. That fraction is more acceptable because that is the lowest common denominator. This one is inefficient. It can be reduced. We can divide out by 4. Divide the numerator, we'll get 17. Divide the denominator, we'll get 20. So that's equal to 68 over 80. That is 34 over 40 if you divide it by 2, just the 2's there. But you can go further, as I said. You can divide 30. Again, the last number is even, so it's a 4 and a 0. So divide by 2, you get 17. Divide by 2, you get 20. So having worked it out for the 80s, you can then reduce it to get the nice answer at the end, 17 over 20. So 17 over 20 is the same as 68 over 80. It's the same number, just written differently. Now subtraction. What's a half take away 1/3? Again, we have to find the common denominator. in this case 6. 2 times 3, 6. A half is 3 over 6. Well, 2 into 6 goes in 3 times. 3 times 1 is 3. So 3 over 6. 1/3 is 3 into 6 goes twice. 2 times 1 is 2. So 1/3 is 2 over 6. So now we've got a half is 3/6 and 1/3 is 2/6. If we subtract 1/3 from a half, what we need now to get to a common denominator, which would be 6. So we'd have 3 over 6, take away 2 over 6, which is just 1 over 6. In other words, a half minus 1/3 is 1 over 6. You can also ask, what is a half of a half? That's a full circle. That's half a circle. That's half of half a circle. So half of a half seems to be a quarter. We start with a full circle, we take a half of it, then we take a half of that again. So half of a half is a quarter. A half of a half is equal to 1/4. So if you write it out, take away of and write it as a multiplied sign, we have a half multiplied by a half. Remember, of means multiply. Half of a half equals a quarter. So what is 1/7 of 2/3? Well, it's 1/7 times 2/3. So it's 2, numerator, 1 times 2 is 2. Denominator, 7 times 3 is 21. So that's the answer. What is 1/7 of 2/3? The answer is 2 over 21. What is 1/5 of 1/5? Well, it's 1/5 times 1/5. 1 times 1 is 1. 5 times 5 is 25. So 1/5 of 1/5 is 1/25. What is 4 times 2 over 9? What's 4 times 2/9? Well, 4 times 2 is equal to 8, and it's 8 over 9. You could do this by multiplication and addition, of course, are related. So instead of saying 4 times 2 over 9, we could add it up. We could say we have 2 over 9 and we have it 4 times. So we have 2 over 9 once, twice, 3, 4. Now if you add it up, we'd have 2 plus 2 plus 2 plus 2 is equal to 8. 8 over 9. The same as 4 times 2 is 8 over 9. Down here we've got 2 multiplied by 1/9 times 3 over 7. Well, that's equal to 2 times 1 is 2. That's 2 over 9. There's 1/9, so 2 over 9 is there, times 3 over 7. Just write it out again, 3 over 7. Now multiply. 2 times 3 is 6. 7 9s, 63. Now, next we go to division of fractions. What is 1/12 times 1/3? Sorry, it's 12 times 1/3 times 1/7. Now, if we, I know we're dividing here, but we're actually multiplying to start. So we'll just go about it this way for a second. Now we have 12 times 1/3 times 1/7. That's 12 times 1 times 1 is 1. 3 times 7 is 21. So it's 12 times 1 over 21, which is 12 over 21. Now simplify. If you simplify, you can divide the top part, the numerator, you can divide that by 3. 3 goes into 12 4 times, but 3 also goes into 21 7 times. So we divide the numerator and the denominator by 3 and we get 4 over 7. Now, with that in mind, look at this one. What is 1 divided by a half? We may write this question as follows. How many halves in 1? We know the answer straight away. We know there are 2 halves in 1. Remember back to the circle at the beginning. When we had it in halves, there are 2 halves in 1. If you join the 2 halves together, you get a full circle. So we know there are 2 halves in 1. So we know that 1 over a half, 1 divided by a half, is 2. 1 half plus a half is equal to 1. So there are 2 halves in 1. So here we've got a numerator of 1, denominator of a half. We're dividing by a fraction. And we're saying there are 2 halves in 1, which is correct. The answer is 2. Now let's hang on to that for a second and move to this slide. So what is 1 divided by 1/3? Well, we know that there are 3 1/3 parts in 1. So there's 1 divided by 1/3, which is equal to 3. If you like, 1/3 plus 1/3 plus 1/3 equals a half. Sorry, it's equal to 1. I beg your pardon. Equal to 1. So I'll go back to the previous slide for a second. Here we have 1 divided by a half, which gives us 1 divided by a half gives us 2. The only time we see a 2 here is in this fraction. So that's. Now go to the next slide again. 1 divided by 1/3, and we're getting 3. There is a pattern. 1 divided by a half is 2, 1 divided by 3 is that. So we say, well, sometimes we'd say by induction, by just continuing to do it. We could do it for 1 divided by a quarter, 1 divided by 1/5. 1 divided by 1/5 is 5. How many 1/5 parts in 1? Well, it's 5. How many quarters in 1? 4. 4 quarters in 1. So there is a pattern. So whatever the value of n, whatever the value of the fraction is, if n is 4, then it's 1 divided by a quarter, which is equal to 4. So when you divide by a fraction, you get that. We sometimes say here, the divisor is the denominator. It's also known as the divisor. And when you're dividing by a fraction, what we say is we invert the divisor, invert it, turn it upside down, invert the divisor and multiply. So if we invert 1 over n, invert it, turn it upside down, so you get n over 1, and multiply. So you get 1n over 1, which is n. Over here, invert the divisor and multiply, we've got 1/3. Take the 1/3, invert it, turn it upside down. So now we get 1 times 3 over 1. 1 times 3 is 3, divided by 1 is still 3. So invert it and multiply, and we get 3. Now, when dividing by fractions, we say invert the divisor and multiply. The divisor is the denominator. And this is what we've done here. We take 1 divided by a half is 2, 1 divided by 1/3 is 3, 1 divided by 1/n whatever n is. N could be 100. If we divide n by 100th, we'll find n is 100. There are 100 100ths in 1. There are 4 quarters in 1. So that's showing, this bit here is just showing you how to invert the divisor and multiply. That's just an expression we use. It's useful to remember. But when you're dividing by a fraction, say invert the divisor and multiply. It always works. Example, 3 divided by 1/4. 3 divided by a quarter. Invert the divisor, turn it upside down, and multiply. When you turn it upside down, you get 3 multiplied by 4 over 1. So we'll ignore the 1 because it doesn't do anything. So it's 3 times 4 is 12. There are 12 quarters in 3. We can do it for fractions. 1/7 divided by 2/7. 1/7 divided by 2/7. Now, to divide by 2/7, we invert the divisor and multiply. So now we get 1/7 multiplied by 7 over 2. Well, the 7 and the 7 will cancel. This is a numerator and that's a denominator. They will cancel out, leaving us with 1 over 2. Or if you want to multiply them out, you can. 7 times 1, 7 times 2, 7 over 14. But they will cancel out and just leaves a half. So 1/7 divided by 2/7 is equal to a half. So we're doing fairly complicated stuff suddenly. Now we're going to come to this one again in other related videos. But there's a rule here. Multiplication and division must be done before addition and subtraction. You should remember this. This is important. Well, it's all important, but this one crops up a lot. If you look at this expression here, 2 times 4 minus 3. There's nothing to do with fractions, this one. This is just a rule I want to place in your mind. So before we go on to the next videos, because we're going to encounter it again, and you will already have just brushed against it once. So that's why it's here. This is actually the last slide in this class. So just plant it in your head. So 2 times 4 minus 3. So it's 2 times 4, 2 times 4 minus 3. 2 times 4 is 8, 8 minus 3 is 5. But you see, up here, unless we have a rule, we could do this wrongly. This is how to do it wrong, or wrongly. We would have 2 times 4 minus 3, 2 times 4 minus 3. But if we did it wrong, if we said, okay, we'll have 2 times 4 minus 3. So we'll write down 2 times 4 minus 3. 4 minus 3 is 1, so it's 2 times 1 is 2. So up here we got the answer 5, and down here we got the answer 2. As I said, this is wrong. Our rule tells us multiplication and division must be done before addition and subtraction. So look across always. Where's the multiply? Where's the divide? Where's the add, subtract? Well, multiplication, subtraction. Well, do the multiplication first, then subtract. Down here, same expression. Look across. Do not subtract first. If you subtract first in this case, you'll get the wrong answer. We'll talk more about this more extensively in subsequent videos. There are a few videos we've planned for very quite basic mathematics, but just to bring everything back to the front of your head. It might have been several years before or since you've done this, so we'll just go across it again, try to bring it back so you'll be familiar straight away. But that's all we're going to deal with in this one, so let's leave it at that and say thank you for watching.